Alright, everyone, let's keep moving. This was a minor setback, and trust me, I'm not pleased about it. But we are about to visit a clothing store, and I wanted new boots anyway, so no point in getting hung up on unfortunate accidents. I said to the assembled group, who nodded solemnly, but I could swear I could almost see a suppressed grin on the two men as they glanced at each other. Everyone, just be sure to watch where you step, I snapped as I glared at them. They quickly fixed their expressions and nodded, getting moving again. I sighed. This was all just so much. I had a sort of dull thanks there was no aberrations on my foot, not yet anyway, and that I didn't need to worry about trying to cover that up, but that still didn't mean that I had to like this turn of events. I threw a jealous glance at Hagar and the other woman, who were still wearing their sturdy boots. Why should they get to keep wearing shoes while I had to walk around on the hard ground and suffer? It just wasn't fair. Even the two men, in their ragged, pathetic clothes, at least had shoes still on their feet. And they had been laughing at me, even. I think they were, at least. Or had that just been another vision, and I was seeing something else over their faces, imagining things that were not actually there? It was getting so hard to tell. Now that I thought about it, though, those two did seem vaguely familiar, and not just in a I've seen them around sort of way. It was like I had some sort of interaction with them before. I threw a glance back at them, but they were bringing up the rear of the group, heads bowed together in a quiet discussion, so I couldn't get a good look at them. Forget it was probably nothing anyway, and besides, who cared about those two? They were nothing to me, just another couple of members of the flock. I pushed the thoughts of those two to the back of my mind, and with that train of thought gone, I only had my shoeless foot to focus on now. Ow. 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 I wished that when I had spent that hour purposely shuffling things around in my backpack, I had thought to pack an extra pair of shoes. It was only going to be a short excursion. There was no need to bring a second pair, I thought, and I sighed. I know, but still. I glanced once more at Hagar behind me, who was staring down at her feet, being careful to not step in the same trap that I had. Maybe she had a pair of spare shoes? But no, of course not. I knew she didn't, because if she did, she would have offered them to me by now. But she hadn't, so I knew she didn't. It was as simple as that. I sighed again, turning my gaze once more forward down the street. Ow. 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 Just don't concentrate on your foot hitting the pavement. Ow. Ow. Don't think about the screaming fit you had earlier today. Ow. Ow. Don't think about the fact that you wandered away in the middle of a big speech and saw something you still don't really understand. Ow. Ow. And don't think about the fact that you apparently did that for 2 hours. Ow. Don't think about any of that. Instead, think about how strong you are, going through all of that and coming out the other side all the better for it. Think of how inspirational you are, leading your people to a better place. Think of what a hero I am to them, how they had chanted my name when I had promised to lead them to salvation. I thought of that night and I smiled. That had been, perhaps, the best night of my life. Then I thought of the sky that night, and how there hadn't been a single star in it. I thought of the thing that was not a man staring down at me from the sky, so very much like a star. I decided that was enough thinking for now. Look at the road. Concentrate on it. Don't step on any of the slime. You really don't want to lose another boot, or even make the same mistake twice with the same foot and lose your sock, too. I could scarcely imagine anything more embarrassing. Look ahead. See if your destination is approaching. Actually, it is. I had been so deep in thought and concentration about not looking like a fool again that I hadn't realized we were only a few blocks away from the stores. Excellent. We can get there, gather up the goods, I can put on a new shiny pair of boots, and we can head home. Heck, maybe I'll even grab a pair of pretty high heels for myself as well. Impractical? Oh, most certainly. But I felt that I had earned it by this point, and besides, you always want to look your best. I bet it would look great with my new dress, too. I would positively radiate power, authority, wealth, leadership, all that good stuff. The thought of it made a wide smile break onto my face, one that, while I enjoyed it myself, I worried would make the others a tad uncomfortable. So I suppressed it down to just a small grin before turning around and waving the others forward. Come on, everyone, we're almost there! I started to pick up the pace a bit, leading the rest to do so as well. So giddy was I, in fact, that I almost didn't notice the shifting movement in one of the storefronts that we were passing by. So subtle that if I hadn't happened to be looking at it right as it happened, I never would have noticed it. I screeched to a halt instantly, raising my hand up in a closed fist to signal to the others to do so as well. I didn't want to, with us so close to the end of the journey. I wanted nothing more than to ignore what I thought I saw and keep moving. But I knew that would be foolish and short-sighted, and I had already made far too many mistakes today. So instead, I peered into the darkness of the store carefully, intent on not letting whatever had moved in there to take me by surprise. The store was unsurprisingly dark. With the power out, there was no lights able to illuminate its interior, but I could tell from the sign above it and from the seating placed near the shattered window that this was a restaurant of some kind. But that didn't matter to me. They could have served gold-plated steaks for all I cared. The only thing that was important to me right now was if something really was moving around back there. I made another gesture to the group, this time telling them to stay where they were, and approached the window slowly, holding my pipe tightly with one hand and reaching into my backpack with the other for my flashlight, a big sturdy thing that required multiple batteries to operate. I clicked it on, shining it around the establishment, but saw nothing except knocked over tables and chairs. It seemed that whatever had been in there, if there had been anything at all, was good at hiding itself, or had already left. Miss Athalia, what is it? Is something there? Hagar whispered from behind me, causing me to nearly jump out of my skin. When had she snuck up on me like that? I turned around to see her straining to look around me, trying to get a peek into the abandoned restaurant. No, it would seem not, Hagar, at least nothing to concern ourselves with. Perhaps just some settling debris. We should keep moving, I said, and while she looked apprehensive at first to that, she nodded only a few seconds later and moved away from the store. I watched her back up to the main group, then turned around and did one last sweep of the building with my flashlight. For a second, I could have sworn I saw something slither behind a knocked-over table, but when I focused my beam of light there, it was still. Maybe there was something in there, maybe not, but I certainly wasn't going in there to figure it out. I had enough problems today to go looking for trouble. So I too pulled away from the shattered business, resuming my place at the front of the pack. As we resumed walking, my thoughts quickly moved away from the restaurant, and despite my best effort to just concentrate on putting one foot in front of the other, quickly turned back to my general situation. I thought about the shoes I wanted to get at the store, and how I had never actually worn high heels before. I hear they are not the easiest things to move around in, that it's sort of like a balancing act, but I figured it couldn't be that hard. I recall once seeing a woman running down the street many years ago, and she had been wearing high heels that had to have been at least 6 inches tall. If she could pull that off, I think I could handle some basic ones. It would just take some practice. Quite suddenly, I thought of my vision from earlier, of the thing that looked like me, and how I had tripped over myself while trying to back away from it. Had I been wearing high heels in that fantasy? I couldn't remember, no matter how hard I concentrated on it. It was as though that memory lay just out of reach. I scowled at the idea, though. I was so sick of these visions getting in the way of my happy thoughts. Maybe it really was time to let them go. They had served their purpose, allowing me to get to the top of the food chain within the flock, but now they seemed to be doing nothing but causing me strife. I felt the meat I had packed sloshing around in my backpack, and my ire turned to it as well. It was its fault that I was changing, growing these terrible body parts on my body that were not supposed to be there. It was its fault that I was being threatened by these prophecies. But if I stopped eating the meat, maybe it would stop the changes, but then it would stop the visions as well. And if I didn't have the visions, then who was I? Would I go back to being a nobody? Just another face in the crowd? My face hardened into a grimace. I would not have that. But then the changes would continue, and I was growing sick of these visions. I was so tired of these thoughts running in circles like this in my head. I felt like I was going nowhere, but I just couldn't shake them. I just wished that I could get some sort of sign, something to help me decide on what path to choose, to show me the way. Hey, we're here, I heard Hagar say, and I looked up from the road to find that we had indeed reached our destination. I glanced to my right, to where the clothing store laid, and I couldn't help the wide smile that broke onto my face as I gazed upon what laid in that storefront window. For you see, I had asked for a sign, and I had received one. Sitting right there, untouched and unblemished, was a perfect red dress, all set up on a mannequin for the world to see. It was incredible, exactly like the one I had imagined in my fantasy earlier in the day. It had all the frills and accents and little things, just as I had pictured it. If that wasn't a sign of some kind, I didn't know what was. I wanted that dress, and I wanted it now. I moved towards it, not thinking about anything else, only intent on getting into the store and getting my hands on my dress, the symbol of my authority. However, a sudden clattering noise knocked me out of my trance, and I turned around to see the rest of the group shoving open the door to the comparatively much less interesting grocery store that laid across the street from my perfect red dress. One of the men shoved against the door again, seemingly struggling with something blocking the way on the other side, but finally managed to force it open enough that he was able to slip through. The other man and the woman whose name I didn't know were quick to follow, leaving only me and Hagar out in the street. I saw her hesitate for a moment, glancing back at me, and then behind me, to the dress in the window. Is that the kind of dress you were looking for, Miss Athalia? She asked, gesturing to the garment behind me. I nodded slowly, turning back to look at it. It really was incredible how it looked exactly like the one from my fantasies. Perhaps it had been a vision, an actual vision, and not just a fantasy, telling me of what may be in my future, and I just didn't realize it at the time. It seemed that it might really be so. I chose not to think about what came after me putting on the dress in the vision. I didn't want to think about that sort of thing anymore. It's a very nice dress, Miss Athalia. I'm sure you will look very, pretty in it. We can, we can go into the clothing store and get it after we get the food and get new boots and stuff, she said, causing me to scowl without turning around. We can? Who did she think she was, telling me what to do? I was the one who decided if we get clothes or food first. Not her. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, without even taking my eyes off the dress, I said, That's okay, Hagar. You all go on ahead. I'll catch up in a minute. I started to walk closer to the store, but once again, Hagar's annoying whine of a voice interrupted me. She was really starting to get on my nerves. Well, I know you really want to get your new clothes, Miss Athalia, but, I think it would, be best if you came into the grocery store with us first. We could really, use your guidance in there, and, I think it would make everyone feel a lot better if we had you while we were in a, unfamiliar place. I sighed and turned around to find Hagar smiling at me nervously, the open door of the grocery store looming behind her. She sounded even more tense than normal, and I wasn't sure why. Her eyes flickered to the grocery store, then back to me. I think I understand. She was scared of being alone, and she wanted me to be there to provide her moral support. I suppose I can't fault her for that, even if I wanted to. But I needed to be there for my people, especially if they were as anxious as this poor thing was. I took one more glance back at the grocery store and that perfect red dress, and then sighed again. I felt like I had been doing that a lot lately. Alright, if it would really make you feel better, I'll come along. But no screwing around, alright? I want to be in and out, half an hour max. She nodded vigorously at that, and then turned around quickly, heading into the grocery store with an appropriate amount of haste. I followed her, taking one more glance back at the dress, that symbol of power, of authority, of composure, and made a silent promise to it that I would be back for it soon. Then I turned and followed Hagar into the dark interior of the grocer, intent on getting out as fast as possible. My eyes took a second to adjust to the dimmer lighting of the store, but as it slowly faded into view, my first impression was that it was a mess. Shelves had been knocked over, trash was scattered everywhere, and the whole place had a rancid odor to it. I threw a disgusted glance at the meat aisle, which was exceptionally easy to find thanks to the huge swarm of flies around it. In fact, the flies were everywhere, and I found myself constantly swatting them away to keep them from landing on me and getting stuck in my hair. I found myself both grateful and annoyed with the store's small footprint, as it meant that it would be fast to search, but also impossible to get away from the offending, rotting produce. Looking at the rotting meat, I thought of my own carnivorous diet, and of the suspiciously non-decaying meat in my own bag, even now. I quickly turned away from the aisle at that thought, instead choosing to check on where my little group was and what they were doing. The two men were near the back of the store, picking through some bags of chips and snack food, trying to find anything salvageable. The woman whose name I didn't know was off to the side, rooting around the back of the counter, maybe looking for cigarettes or something like that. I know that we had quite a few people that smoked in the flock, and that their supplies were starting to run low, and that was causing them to get antsy. I never understood the appeal myself. Nasty things that leave a disgusting residue wherever you go. But I suppose as long as they didn't do it near me, I really couldn't come up with any reason that they shouldn't be allowed to continue the habit. Besides, people could probably do with a little stress relief right now. Finally, Hagar was in the canned section, picking through what little supplies were left and throwing any good ones she found into her bag. There weren't a ton of canned goods left at this point, but it was probably still worth a look over. I grimaced as I watched her put away a thing of canned asparagus. Someone else would be getting that particular treat. So, that left only me. I wandered over to the more miscellaneous aisle, looking to see if maybe any batteries or other useful supplies had survived this long. I was careful to pick my way around the junk that was all over the floor, especially because I was acutely aware of my bootless foot. I gritted my teeth when the thought occurred to me that there was a very real chance I could step on a nail or something equally nasty. How did I let Hagar talk me into coming in here first? I was getting far too soft with her. I absentmindedly threw a pack of batteries into my backpack, not even checking what type they were. I was sure we would need them for something. Probably. Eventually. I squinted to check the shelves for other, at least somewhat useful items, the deep shadows making it difficult to make out the specifics. Would we need dog food? Probably not. I don't think we had any dogs. Besides, I didn't want to haul that back. It looked heavy, and I would look like a moron if I came back with a giant bag of something we had no use for. I sighed, kicking over a random bit of garbage with my still covered foot. I wish we could just hurry up and finish this. It was never the food I was interested in. I'd only said we would come here to appease the flock, and now it, of course, was the first place we visited. Perhaps I was being unreasonable, but I really didn't care. It had been a very trying day, and I wanted to get some shoes on, not to mention the dress that still called to me. I passively glanced around again to see how everyone was doing, hoping they were almost done, but froze in my tracks as my eyes landed on something, or rather, someone, who hadn't been there before. There, sitting on top of the checkout counter, perfectly poised, as though she was sitting on a throne in a castle, and not a grimy counter in a looted grocery store, was the woman from my visions. Mother. What? How? What was she doing here? I stared in shock, and she looked right at me, face unreadable. Her blonde hair fell perfectly around her pale face. Her lovely blue eyes gazed at me, then through me. It was almost as though I wasn't there at all. She sighed, ever so slightly, and the way she moved when she did made me afraid in a way I cannot really explain. It was as though the very air was a river, and she was swimming through it while the rest of us fumbled around on the muddy banks. It was the kind of movement that made me think that if she wanted to, she could simply stand up and fly with the greatest of ease, as though gravity didn't even apply to her. It was like she was something else entirely. I had never gotten such a good look at her before, and now that I had, I found myself shrinking back slightly. Her electric blue eyes gazed at me, so bright it was like staring into the sun, and I found that I was having trouble breathing. I was struck with the thought that this was the second time today that someone had stared at me in a way like this. Thankfully, unlike the thing that was not a man, she didn't hold my gaze for long, nor could I see her through my closed eyelids. She looked away, turning to gaze at Hagar, who was now approaching me, seemingly ignorant to the fact that there was another person in our midst. In fact, she walked right past Mother, not even sparing her a glance, and it was in that moment that it all made sense. This was another vision. She wasn't actually here. Of course not. That would be madness. Of course not. No, she was still wherever she was, sitting under her tree, not here, in this dark and depressing place. For some reason, that thought made it ever so slightly easier to breathe. I managed to tear my gaze away from her into Hagar, who was now haphazardly picking her way across all the garbage on the ground in my aisle to get close to me. I could still see Mother in the background. I wanted to make sure that she remained in my line of sight, but for now, I could spare a moment to speak to one of my flock.